Okay, the next panel is Dimas DeJesus from LISTA. Joly, you're going to have to get up if you want to testify. And Jay Sulzberger. Mr. DeJesus, why don't you go ahead, and thank you very much for waiting such a long time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councilwoman Brewer and City Council members. It's an honor to wait this long to speak my mind, but make it quick. I am Dimas DeJesus. I am the LISTA New York Tech Council President. LISTA is an organization committed to our goals of educating, motivating, and encouraging the use of technology for the empowerment of the Latino community. We hope to harness the power of technology to conquer the digital divide while developing Latino technology professionals for the future. And it's coming very quick. As an organization that serves our local community in the New York to those who are among the most severely impacted by a lack of access to technology, we urge you to keep your #1 focus on the need to get everyone connected. We are concerned that some of the regulations on the internet could, as applied, inhibit the goal of universal access and leave disenfranchised communities further behind. We are also concerned that other proposed regulations could inhibit investment being made by companies employing hundreds of thousands of workers and connecting millions to the opportunities that broadband technology affords to those in our community, from distance learning to applying for jobs online. Every day in America, access to broadband becomes more essential to improving personal economic outcomes, expanding the availability and quality of healthcare, and increasing educational opportunities for students and teachers alike. Yet, today, only 40% of Hispanic households are connected to high-speed internet service, placing 3/4 of Latino homes on the wrong side of a new digital divide. The consequences for our communities under a system of net neutrality regulations would be far-reaching. The core concept of an open internet operated transparently is highly desirable, and we support it wholeheartedly. But the New York City can't afford to get this wrong. Depending on how it is defined, interpreted, and applied, it's conceivable that some of the elements of net neutrality may be particularly detrimental to groups that we represent. Therefore, LISTA makes a request that any resolution considered by this committee would be the product of a careful and empirical analysis of the impact that any net neutrality regulations would have on people with disabilities, low income, minority, multilingual, elderly, and young Americans. This committee mission needs to ensure that net neutrality would not delay bridging the digital divide by altering consumer pricing and discouraging broadband adoption and deployment. We hope that your resolution would not reflect presumed conclusions until such an analysis is complete. In conclusion, we should continue to focus on deployment and adoption of broadband technologies that can deliver greater economic opportunity for everyone, especially those in greatest need for it. The Council should focus its energy and resources on moving us closer towards the development of a broadband plan, ensuring the deployment to those without access and providing to those who have yet to adopt the benefits with solid information on the transformative power of broadband technology in today's global online economy.
Thank you very, very much. Well said. Joly or Jay, who's going next? Jay?
Sure. Okay. Actually, Mr. DeJesus has actually said a few things, and I was going to say something else, but, well, we know the track record of, for example, the telephone companies in getting special deals with the government and promising to provide by the late 90s all sorts of broadband connections, all sorts of places. They didn't do it. We don't need any more studies. The answer is you give them money and they eat it up and they don't do what they promise legislatures. But if one wants a study, one should see what happened to that money. And Bruce Kushnick is the fellow who's been looking into this. Okay, I didn't think I would say that. I just want to repeat what James Vasile said. But I want a particular thing, one or two things to say. the arguments of the second panel, on which Mayo, Simons, and Spivak were, I think I've got the names right, were basically the same arguments that we've been hearing for many years in many areas of the economy, for example, banking. After all, they wouldn't do anything so stupid as to cost the taxpayers $1 trillion and increase our unemployment rate to what? I don't know what the present number is, but suffice it to say it's higher than it was before we deregulated them.
Jason, if you can stick to the,
Sure. Okay. Well, let's specifically deal with the claim that the telephone company and the cable company would never do anything in favor of their own, to advantage themselves unfairly. I remember in the early 90s, a friend of mine wanted to put a modem on his telephone line to connect via dial-up to the net. And he had to go to the PSC, so he wasn't charged $500 a month for a dial-up connection through the telephone company. And actually, late last night, I inquired as to the cost of getting from the cable company in Morningside Depths, where I live, their package of services. And here's how it works. If you do the triple play, which is on its face a gross conflict of interest because there exist telephony services over the internet, plus they provide you their own telephone service, well, they'll give you high-speed internet at a relatively decent rate. It's still overcharging. But as long as you take their telephone thing in the triple play. But if you just want the internet and cable TV, they strongly suggested to me, I don't know if this is a fact, that you wouldn't be able to use the over-the-internet telephony things. I don't know if this is true. It may be false, my accusation here. But whether or not the specific accusation is, it's a conflict of interest. The claims of the second panel that they would never do any such thing are disproven, and they've been disproven again and again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joly.
Hi, my name's Joly McPhee. I'm the secretary of isoc-ny. We're the local chapter of the Internet Society. I had to consult to see what the Internet Society's policy on this is, and they are, in fact, somewhat agnostic. And I just extracted this. The Internet Society believes that the debate over such issues as network neutrality rules masks a more important discussion related to the future of user centricity of the Internet and the preservation of the underlying principles that have made it the success it is today. The guiding principles for decision-making must be the preservation of 1, openness, 2, transparency, 3, edge-based intelligence, and above all, 4, user choice. It's important that the future commercial offerings ensure that the Internet's available as a tool for use as well as a medium for viewing content. As the landscape changes, what is clear is that a user's ability to choose among providers is as important and has a direct bearing on as their ability to choose among subscription service packages. So what we're saying is that if people had choice, then this would be irrelevant. And then what you come to in this situation is where, formerly the telephone company was a dumb pipe. All they did is voice. Now they're in the content business. At the same time, we have the cable company, and they're in the content business. And they're having to provide, this facility to other people that are in the content business. And one wonders if, is ultimate, before we had loop unbundling, that where, and so we could have other internet service providers, and that's out the window. So possibly at some, that this is really a red herring, and that's what really is going to be, the big fight is going to be structural separation down the line. But after that, I just want to sort of mention a few things that to illustrate the thing. One is, Tim Wu coined the term network neutrality. And I've read the stuff he wrote around the time, and he talks about how in the beginning of the movie industry, everybody was making little movies for everybody else, and then eventually they came up and one guy bought all the theaters and they formed this. So they controlled the content and the distribution, and so that, and that did it. And in the radio business, Sarnoff, there was lots of little radio stations, and then eventually they made the networks and they controlled the thing. And we take it for granted now that the internet is this diverse thing, but there's no real reason why the same thing, will not happen again. To Whitaker, who was the guy who, Wu was the one guy on the one side, Whitaker on the other side, who said, he wants Google should pay for using his pipe. I believe that this is what in internet terms we call a troll, where someone makes a controversial statement just to stir people up, that he's looking for money or something somewhere, and he wasn't really serious. He was just, stirring the pot. 3, the Comcast thing, which is known as the egregious example. Well, this in fact could be construed as reasonable network management with the peer-to-peer thing. There was a technical thing that they were opening, that TCP had opened so many connections. An analogy is if you had a buffet and there's only a certain number of plates. Well, what this application does is it takes all the plates. There might be lots of food on the table, but no one else can get a plate. There's only a problem with DOCSIS 1, which is like, the old style and current style in New York form of network connection. It doesn't bother Verizon or people on ADSL because they don't have that same restriction. The problem was that they didn't tell their customers, and so transparency is the thing that's really important. The Internet Society is in its thing. It says that, tiered pricing and so on, is perfectly acceptable, and it's possible that, that innovation, on the edges and intelligence in the middle, is something that you wouldn't want to restrict. And I think this is something you really have to think about in this, is are you restricting innovation in the center? And then we come to a thing where right now there is innovation in the center, in that, as we're seeing in the recent Arbor report, that Google, now that they were talking about tier 1, what's going on the backbone, that Google now has their own backbone, and in fact, instead of people peering with them to take traffic, the traffic's kind of flowing the other way because they have so much thing. And this is still another reason why, the people who have the pipes are trying to get into content, because that's where all the money's going in advertising to the pipes. And so this is an economic problem rather than a discrimination or a social content problem. That's really what's going on here. So I still say it's a bit of a red herring. And then the Berkman report that just went down to the FCC that looked at what's going on around the world and did the biggest analysis ever has shown that P2P is on the way down, because as people's bandwidth go up, they don't need to go P2P. They can just get the stuff, that people are downloading stuff more and accessing, as there's more, it was when the content wasn't there that people were having to exchange content. Now that the content is there, they're doing that more. And the other thing is that applications, were at the edge, are no longer at the edge. More and more those applications are online. People don't use their own email program. They use Gmail. They use things like this. So the things are on there. So it's much more about what's going on in the middle than what's going on the edge, and restricting access to things like that. And one egregious example in New York I'd like to point out is like Attorney General Cuomo caused Time Warner and Comcast and all these companies to block access to Usenet, which is, I think, under these regulations, that will hopefully be, knocked down. And I guess that's my lot.
Okay. Joly, thank you very much. It's great to end with you, because you certainly put a lot of time in with us, and I appreciate it. I want to conclude by thanking everybody who participated. This was a huge effort, both by the speakers and by the staff. And to also say that I think we've had a good dialogue back and forth, and we will try to craft something that is appropriate to the discussion and to the current situation, both locally and nationally. So I want to thank everybody, and we look forward to further discussions. Thank you very much. This hearing is now concluded.